Hey, everybody.
Thanks for tuning in to the Hanging On to Hope podcast.
I'm Brenda J.
And I'm Karen Wonder.
And we are HangingOnToHope.org.
This podcast is intended as educational and is not psychological or medical advice. Always consult a professional when needed, and we disclaim any liability in connection with the instruction, information, or advice given.
Welcome to the Hanging On to Hope podcast. This is Brenda J. Today we're so excited to have Deanne Welsh with us. Deanne is an author, writing coach, spiritual director, and founder of Unstoppable Writers Community. She helps writers move past fear and insecurity so they can bring their stories to life, whether it's a memoir, a book, or simply writing for healing. She leads the Unstoppable Writers Collective membership and Momentum Mastermind, a weekly group for writers who want consistent support to move their writing projects forward. She also hosts creative workshops that blend faith, creativity, and courage. Deanne's the author of When God Calls a Writer, Moving Past Insecurity to Write with Confidence, and When God Equips a Writer, Moving Past Doubt to Embrace Your Writing Destiny. Recently, she shared in her newsletter how she's been unpacking boxes after a move, and how that's been a lot like writing, one box at a time, one page at a time. We love that reminder. So Deanne, welcome to the Hanging On to Hope podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Brenda and Karen. I'm really honored to be here. I know a lot of your listeners have walked through really hard things, and so it just feels sacred to be able to talk about writing and healing on this podcast in this space that you've created. I love reminding people that you don't have to have it all figured out to start writing. You really just need the courage to show up with God, one word at a time.
Love that.
Yeah.
So let's start with your story. What inspired you to start Unstoppable Writers? Was there a defining moment when you realized this was part of your calling?
Yes. So back in 2017, I was actually really discouraged about my own writing journey. And I had started and stopped, and I was just getting into online marketing and Kindle publishing. And I just had a lot of doubts and insecurities. And I remember having this prayer time with God, slightly ugly prayers where you're crying and just, I don't know what I'm doing. Help me. And as I was praying, I just really sensed God reminding me, no one else can make you give up. Publishers can say no, life can be hard, but I have a choice to keep showing up. And that's when kind of the phrase Unstoppable Writers came up, because I realized that as writers, we get to choose to be unstoppable. No one can take that from us. And I forget his name, but there was a man who was in prison for a long time unjustly, and he literally wrote a book in his head. And then when he was released, he put it on paper. And so even if whatever circumstances are happening, you get to choose to keep writing. And I also love the reminder of how we can be unstoppable because God's unstoppable. So kind of that bigger picture too, that if God's giving you that desire to write, it's a gift and not something you have to carry alone. So that totally shifted my thinking. I went from I'm failing at this writing thing to I get to keep showing up because God hasn't changed his mind about my calling. And so that's when I actually decided also to kind of build my entire business and brand around Unstoppable Writers. It's not about having it all together. It's about not quitting, even when you don't necessarily know the future and there's a lot of ups and downs.
That's great.
Well, you recently talked about unpacking boxes after your move as a metaphor for writing. Now, we love that image. Can you share how that came about and what it means for writers who feel overwhelmed starting out?
Yes. So we moved recently, and I'm sure all of us have moved at some point. So there's that point when all your stuff is in the new place, but it's just kind of stacked everywhere. There's mazes of boxes that you're wandering around. And I had this morning where I was just really frustrated and this is going to take so long. And I felt behind, and I was talking to a friend, a writer friend, and she just reminded me, don't unpack the whole house today. Just pick one box. And so I chose a box, I opened it, sorted it, put a few things away. And by the end of unpacking that box, I just realized how even though there was still the maze of boxes, it didn't even look all that different from before unpacking that box. But that one little area felt clean and like put away. And it made me laugh because it's exactly like writing and exactly like the advice that I give people about writing. And especially when we are trying to journal or write stories that have trauma or deep pain, it can feel very overwhelming to try to look at the whole house of our story, all the years, the memories, the journals. And there's just that sense of how am I ever going to put this down? And those feelings are valid and normal. Even if you have a strong nudge of one day I want to write my story or one day I want to put this down, it's normal for it to feel big and not being sure where to start. And so my advice is one thing at a time, one box, one sentence, one scene, one conversation. You have permission to say, today, I'm just going to write this one memory or this one sentence, this one word. And that's enough for that moment, because just like moving, there's some boxes that you peek into and you're like, nope, that's not for today. Maybe you're not ready to deal with the medicine cabinet or the kitchen. And that's okay. You get to choose your pace. You get to choose your focus. And it doesn't have to be perfect. I think that's a myth, even for people who maybe look at me and say, oh, you have 7 books published. You have this all figured out and you must just have this perfect writing routine and perfect flow for each new book. And it's not. It's rarely perfect. Life happens. And so give yourself grace to remember. And I think especially this season, giving ourselves space to grieve is so important. We don't do grief well as a culture. And so in writing about memories and hard things, giving yourself sacred pauses to grieve is so important. So again, just one box, one sentence, and that's enough.
That's really good, because I always feel so overwhelmed when I even think about starting to write a book. You just made it so simple. To me, anyway, just one thought at a time if I'm ready to deal with it. And maybe I can grieve through it all and stop.
Yeah, I'm sure it's very therapeutic if you're writing anything, because that's what I want to do too at some point. Is I'm sure as you're processing things that there's a lot of therapy with that. And I just moved 6 months ago, but I still have boxes I haven't all the way unpacked. It's just that stuff that you don't really know what to do with, paper.
Yes.
Like, I don't want to throw it away, but I don't know where to put it. So I like your analogy too, because when I think about doing that too, it feels overwhelming, but it's just doing a little at a time. So you've written about how God calls and equips writers. How has your faith shaped the way you teach and encourage people in the writing process?
I shared that shift in my writing journey about realizing, okay, I have a choice, who I am as a writer, how I show up. And then also a shift from writing for God and feeling like my writing journey and success is all on my shoulders to, you know what, God's really inviting me to write with him, and he created me. So I'm his, my story is his. And that kind of took the pressure off to make it perfect or try to figure out all the pieces and kind of embrace the mystery of writing. Because what every seasoned writer will tell you is that writing is charting an unknown path. And it's giving yourself the gift of curiosity and kind of seeing where the story leads. There's so many times where I've been writing and there'll be a deeper insight or realizing, wow, I hadn't seen this perspective or this before, because writing really slows you down and helps you notice and be present to things. So when I coach writers, I'm not only focused on like the productivity and if you're moving forward, like that matters, but even more so, I want to know, like, how are you experiencing God in this process? Are you being kind to yourself in this process? Are you listening even to the season of life you are in? Because someone who, let's say, has wide open spaces and a home office, like their season of writing and pace is going to look very different from someone who has small kids or who's working full time or caregiving. And so we have to really own our own writing journey and be okay with our pace and process. It's going to look different for every writer.
Yeah, I did notice like a lot of times writers will be pretty hard on themselves, especially ones that have written books before, but it's probably a lot different now. There's more self-publishing and things like that as opposed to before when you had to have a publisher. Is that true?
Yes, absolutely. And I think anyone, like whether it's a writer or an artist, we always have this vision in our brains of this is what my book will look like, or this is my dream of what it'll like, just very vivid and bright in our brains. And then when we're doing the actual work of painting or writing, sometimes what's coming out feels so much less than what we've dreamed. And so it's really living in that gap and wrestling with that as creatives.
Mm. Many of our listeners have experienced trauma or abuse, and sometimes writing about it can feel painful or even unsafe. What would you say to someone who wants to write but doesn't know where to start because it feels too heavy?
First, I want to say to you that if your story feels heavy or even unsafe, that it's normal and there's nothing wrong with you. Trauma does feel heavy, and your body notices that when you sit down to write about it. You're kind of reliving it. They've actually done studies where they looked at people's brains when they were doing an activity like drinking water or going for a walk, and then they took scans of people's brains reading about those things. And when you're reading about them, it activates the same things in your brain as if you were actually doing it. So if you carry that over to writing about trauma, you're not just writing it outside of yourself, you're really reliving it in a sense. And so that's why you need to have so much grace with yourself and also not do it alone. So for me, when I wrote my memoir, the first part of it about growing up as a missionary kid who moved a lot of times, it actually sent me to the counselor's office because it was just stirring up so much unresolved grief. And so when you're writing about trauma, having support matters, whether it's a trusted therapist, a trauma-informed counselor, a safe friend, or even just a small group of writers who get it. A wise counselor once told me when I had a lot of unresolved grief and trauma was to set a timer for 10 minutes. So if you're writing and grief comes up, sadness comes up, set a timer for 10 minutes and then give yourself full permission to grieve, cry, and write just honestly, kind of pouring it out on the page. And then when the timer goes off, it's okay to pack it up, to close the journal, go for a walk, get some tea. And the reason I love that idea about setting a timer is that grief can feel overwhelming and all-consuming. But if we can give it a container where we can feel it and move through it, but also then set it aside, for me was really helpful as I was writing that memoir of being able to feel and then set it aside. So again, if you are wanting to write, but it's triggering grief or trauma and feels heavy, you might just want to start there. A 10-minute timer with you and the page, knowing that you can set it aside, and just know that God is not rushing you. If you're feeling that nudge to write, you don't have to do it alone, and it doesn't have to be a fast process.
Yeah, I like that. There's a book, I've read it, but it's one of those books I have to reread because I struggle with it so much, but it's called Try Softer. I don't know if you've heard of it, but I just need that book as I tend to white knuckle through things and stress myself out. She talks about containment in there, because I got her guided journal because I'm like, I need to dig deeper into this. And I sat down a couple of weeks ago and it was like, because she talks about that, taking all your feelings and putting it in a safe container. And I like that concept of doing that. I think what you said is true because my son just got married and I was trying to think of stories for my speech that I was going to give. And so I read through an old journal. It was from 2007, the one I read through, but I just read through that whole journal from the beginning to the end. And it brought me I just felt like it was this chaotic, it's like you're saying, I felt like I was reliving it. It's almost like a video camera when you read your journals, because I journaled so much because that's how I coped with everything. But it just floods you with all these memories, things you forgot about. And I was like, oh my gosh, how did I even function then? Because I was homeschooling and it was just so much going on. I was running all over the place. And I was like, gosh, you kind of forget until you're like, you do when you're reliving it. It's therapeutic, but I can see how you would need to have something like that, like a place, okay, I'm going to contain this now and continue on,
Well, I love that we're having this podcast because I would have never even known how to begin writing down my story, whether I publish it or not, in order to heal. I thought, well, that might be a really good idea to start writing things down in order to heal. But wow, like I would need those 10 minutes I have a hard time processing things and grieving and feeling emotion because that's my coping mechanism is just to dissociate. So that's really, really good. And I hope our listeners will listen to this too and take that advice.
Yeah, that God's not rushing you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a very powerful topic. What's the difference between writing to heal versus writing to publish? And how can someone know which season they're in?
So they are definitely two different seasons with two different audiences. That helps me distinguish between the two. So if you are writing to heal, it's very private and personal, and it's really you, God, and the page. That's it. So the benefit of writing to heal is that it's very private and it can be messy, unedited. For me, when I'm processing to heal or writing to heal, it's very just stream of consciousness. Almost, I like to think of the Psalms almost like lamenting or just writing it exactly how I feel it without worrying, oh, this sounds really bad or that's so harsh. Like just giving yourself the freedom to lament, which is also a spiritual practice that we don't really talk about.
Yeah.
And because it's unedited, there's not that pressure of how to share it with someone or put it out into the public. Like it's going to be a reflection on you as a professional. If you are writing to heal, I have in the past brought some of those messy things to my counselor or therapist, and that can be very helpful to say some of those things aloud. There's power when we write things down and we see it. It kind of helps it get outside of our body and look at it and kind of get our arms around it. When I published my memoir, I actually needed help to get it published because it was so messy and raw that I just kept getting stuck. And so I gave a trusted friend the very messy raw, and then she came in and made changes and edits, and then I just had to look it over and we published it. But speaking things aloud is also powerful. So if you are writing to heal, having some safe spaces to share parts of it and hear your voice read it can be even more healing because it's kind of owning your story, not just with your writing, but with your voice and your body. Now, if you're writing to publish, that's where we start thinking about the reader. So who is this for? How is it going to serve them? And what is this about? Those are kind of the three questions. Who is it for? How is it going to serve them? What is this book about? So if you're trying to discern, which season am I in? Notice the questions that you're asking. If you're still asking, is it safe to write this down? Or this feels really big and raw, you're probably in a healing season. But if you are able to write and not feel as much emotion or as much triggered, then you might be moving into discerning who your audience is and what this book and message is going to be about for them.
That's good.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Wow, I'm learning a lot today. So you often talk about letting God bring out our creativity. What are some spiritual practices that help reconnect us to that creative flow, especially when we feel shut down or stuck?
I love this question because I think there's so much inspiration all around us. And there was this essay I read by Annie Dillard, and she had booked herself a cabin to go write. And this is in her book, The Writing Life. So she goes to the cabin and she's going to write, but she finds herself procrastinating and procrastinating. And as she's not sitting down to write, she's feeling so much frustration of, I booked this cabin, I'm here, like, why is this not flowing? And then she ended up having this turning point where she decided, you know what? I'm going to let it go. I'm just going to do what my body, my soul feels like it needs. And so I can't remember exactly, but I think she took a nap, took a walk. And what she realized was writing is so much more than just the sitting down to write. Because as she walked in nature, she started noticing things. She felt more inspired. She got some ideas. And I loved that thought that writing is more than just sitting down to write, because that gives me so much freedom as a writer to treat more of my life as writing, whether it's coffee with a friend, putting my kid to bed and the strange things he says as a little kid. So I just encourage you, if you are wanting to be more creative, more inspired, that there's inspiration all around. And it just, I think, is slowing down to notice it. One specific practice for you is what I call a 5x5. And so I will set a timer for 5 minutes and simply brain dump on the page everything in my head, whether it's a story idea, a fear, a frustration. Just let the pen run wild and just dump it all out. And then I pause and I will set the timer for another 5 minutes. And I go from output mode to still mode and listening mode. And often I will simply ask, either pray or write in my journal, God, what do you want to say to me today? And then I just kind of have my pen ready and will write down. Sometimes it's a verse, sometimes it's an image or a phrase. Sometimes it's like random words that are just standing out to me. Sometimes it's even like a letter from God to me. So like, dearest Deanne, and then I'll sense like, you're trying too hard. There was a season where almost every letter to God to me was like, rest, let go. And I'm very type A, so I did not like those letters. Like, please just tell me, like, go harder or figure it out. But it was always this invitation to peace and rest. And so listening for that 5 minutes opens me up to hear and receive and not push my agenda so hard on my writing on my day.
That's good.
Yeah, really letting God guide you.
I feel I'm relating to Karen because she writes stuff down. I feel like she's probably done a lot of this. I need to start doing it. That's where we're at.
One encouragement for you, because some of us writing comes more naturally, but others of us speaking may come more naturally. And there's so many voice to text apps now.
I love those.
If you find it hard to sit and write, bring your phone on your walk or on the treadmill.
I like speaking my thoughts into things. That's why I like
Yeah.
ChatGPT. I just talk to it. I don't type a thing. So
Yeah.
maybe that's where it's making sense now. I seem to get a lot more done now that I can talk into my computer and my phone. So you hit it right there.
I have a question that we don't have on here, but like, how important is, because I'm not very good at grammar and stuff like that. Like, how important is that if you do eventually want to publish a book to know grammar rules and all that? Or is that something that can always be fixed up after the fact?
That's a great question. And my first response is it's not all that important. You can hire people to fix your grammar and fix your spelling mistakes. There's a famous author who actually had dysgraphia. And so she would dictate her books and then other people could clean them up and make them correct. I think what matters more than your grammar is the strength of your ideas and the message you're communicating. And so not knowing grammar is not a disqualification, but it is something to know. If it's not your weakness, you will want, whether you're self-publishing or traditional, to have people who can help you with that area.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember when I was blogging for a while there, I would write blogs for our website. And my son at the time was taking a college grammar course. And I'm like, can you read this? And he would be like, because I switched from like, what is it? Me to I, and I get those mixed up a lot when I'm writing. So
do you recommend like an AI driven thing or is I feel like what you're saying, it's way better to be in community and have support than just start writing it on your own because you're going to go through a lot of emotion. I think that's kind of what you do, but do they have writers that can help you write like AI type things?
Well, there's like Grammarly that a lot of people are familiar with.
I've heard of that,
ChatGPT can even, like, if you put it in and say like highlight errors. The one thing to be careful with AI is that sometimes it can sound the same or it can even edit your voice out. So that's where a human editor who's trained professionally will have a better eye for that. Now, one thing is sometimes the professional editors can be more expensive. So if you are wanting feedback, a critique group might be the best place to start, where you find a group of peers and you bring a couple pages and you give feedback to each other. And in the feedback, you can ask for idea feedback, kind of more that developmental edit, or you could say, hey, I think this is close. Just help me see any glaring grammar errors.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
But
Doesn't feel so
yeah,
intimidating.
it would be good to use the AI for someone like me who wants to speak it and not type, and then just take it to the editor or just get it down on paper.
Yeah.
Yeah, that the first draft, just getting it down is important. And I think if you are using like ChatGPT or something, you want to give it very specific directions to keep your word choice, your cadence. You don't want it to edit you out and
Yeah.
still feel like you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's important.
Tell us about your Momentum Mastermind. What does a typical session look like, and why is accountability so powerful for writers?
So I like starting things where I see a need in the writing community and I think, okay, we need something to fill this need. And so what I noticed in the writing community is that it's very easy for people to get discouraged in the writing journey because it does have so many ups and downs. And whether you're going the traditional route and you're pitching your work, or you're going the self-publishing route, which then also means you're figuring out your marketing and the formatting, there's a lot of pieces, that writers were feeling burnt out and feeling very, very alone in their journey. And it's really hard as a writer, if you're just by yourself in your office, to be the person always trying to encourage yourself and like keep moving forward. So I started Momentum Mastermind, where a small group of committed writers, it's no more than 6 plus me, so 7. And we meet every single week and we alternate. So one week we will have a session where we're doing a deep dive into challenges, helping each other. Sometimes there's a guest speaker. And then the next week will be a power hour where we are co-writing on Zoom. So we'll do a check-in, see if we can help each other on our challenges, and then spend like 50 minutes actually working on our writer project. And what I love about it is you're showing up every week. So you're showing up if you had the best writing week and you got 10 chapters done, or you are showing up if life happened and you got 0 done and you're discouraged. We show up every week, and all the members right now, they've been in the group for over a year. And it's just such a powerful thing to see the same faces every week and know that they know you, they know what you're working on, and to just encourage each other to keep showing up and taking our next small step.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Now, is that a private, like paid group, or how does that work?
It is, yes.
Okay. That's a great idea though.
So has anybody finished a book yet in the group?
Well, one gal in the group published 10 things this year.
Oh, wow.
She like ghost wrote some projects, co-wrote some projects, launched kids' books. Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. Would you suggest, like, I hear people all the time say, like, they got to write their dissertation or whatever for their doctorate. This would be something to get, like, they lack the motivation to do that. So this is something they could probably do too, to get something like that done, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, it is.
So we love how you talk about showing up and giving yourself grace. How do you help writers balance discipline with rest, especially when life feels chaotic?
If we have discipline without grace.
To be continued. Stay tuned for next week's part 2. You don't want to miss it.
Thanks for tuning in to Hanging On to Hope. Check out our website, hangingontohope.org. There are resources on there, and if you would like to donate or volunteer, you can do that through our website. We are a brand new nonprofit, so we appreciate any and all support. And we thank you for listening, and until next time, keep hanging on to hope. We are evidence that there is hope and healing for you, and our passion is to help you find it too. So thanks for tuning in.
Thanks for listening, everyone.